Hi, everybody. I'm Steve Lee of the Hollywood Sound Museum, and I'm thrilled to have this gang with me that I worked with. What it was 7 years ago that I sat down with you.
Seven.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
They decided to put together a little documentary on a film that I had a small hand in called RoboCop. And we're going to talk to them about that documentary. The 4-part series is on Screenbox right now, and there are more coming. Everyone, let's just go around the room. Could you please introduce yourself and tell me what part you had with this documentary, and whose idea was it initially amongst you three? It had to be one of you three. So,
Well, we'll come to that in a second. My name's Gary Smart. I'm the producer of a documentary, but also the co-director of Cult Screen UK Limited, obviously the production company that's behind RoboDoc.
I'm Christopher Griffiths. I'm the co-director and co-writer of RoboDoc, the Creation of RoboCop.
I'm Eastwood Allen. I'm the co-director, co-writer of RoboDoc. It was funny then, Chris, just watching you having to think about the roles.
You absolutely should throw in editor as well, East. Don't shy away from that. You can one-up me on this one, mate.
Yeah. Let's not list Eastwood's roles because we'll be here all night.
That's right. Well, I especially want to talk to Eastwood about the editing of the thing, which is what one of the big jobs you had there too, which must have been monumental with something like this.
It was, but I'm gonna start off. I was so looking forward to seeing you, Steve. I'm gonna start off by saying, blowing a load of smoke basically, but just by saying a massive thank you, genuinely, because we've had a handful of people that have stayed in touch with us throughout the 7 years, and you were in the top 1, 2, 3. So the fact that you were so gracious with your time.
Well,
the archive that we managed to source was only because you, at your end in LA, went out there and got it scanned for us. And I remember when you called us up the day when you were in John Davison's office scanning everything.
Right. I sent you a voice message.
There's too much stuff. You're gonna have to pick. I've got like 2 hours.
I almost felt like that. I felt bad because I knew it was costing someone money to order all this stuff, because I literally went through the entire collection there at the Academy, from John's collection and some other stuff, and I was like, oh yeah, they want this, they'll want this, they'll want this. And I was like, who's paying for
I actually said to you, didn't I? I actually said it'd be quicker for you to list the stuff that you think I won't want, like rather than list do you want this? Because I'm always, as Chris and Gary knows, we're always going to say yes.
Yeah,
so
exactly. And I saw a good chunk of it in the piece. I mean, I was like, oh yeah, I scanned that.
That's mine.
That storyboard. Oh right, that was on the call sheet, because I'd totally forgotten about Stephen Lim's cartoons and how I scanned almost all of those. So yeah, that was wild. But let's back up. So whose idea was this in the first place? So is it one of you three?
I mean, I'll probably start very briefly. So
sure,
we'd already worked on documentaries together already, and we'd already shot a couple. East was on board. Obviously, we also called Bruce to a story Fright Night, and then we always, as we always do, we always try and figure out the next project. And then Chris was nagging me for ages about RoboCop, and he was obsessed with it. And I kind of thought it probably was going to be too big to do for us, because we'd only done.
And he was right.
Well, he was, yeah, it's his fault. But I just think because it was so big in terms of obviously the IP, and we'd just done like Fright Night, which was a lot of smaller horror, and it was a cult film, and Hellraiser in the UK. So in the end, I think what happened was we kind of talking about it, shall we do it or not? And then Chris reached out to an author who'd just written a book about the franchise, and basically asked his opinion. Do you think it's worthwhile us, obviously, looking at a documentary? And this guy responded back saying, no, I don't think you should. My book's the most definitive book out there. No one's going to speak to you. And I think Chris was a bit browbeaten, and I just said to him, we're definitely going to do it now, because he said no.
Yeah.
And then that's what happened. So, and then obviously Eastwood, I think we probably had already spoke about it in obviously knowing Eastwood for a couple of months or a year probably before that. So yeah, that's kind of how it grew, wasn't it, Chris, in terms of being told no by someone? We should listen.
Times I think I thought this was never going to happen. I think right up until the last couple weeks, is this? I mean, I think it still feels a bit like a dream, to be honest, that it's here now. Do you know what I mean? The posts are going out, the clips are out, getting some views, and it's just, I don't think it's fully absorbed yet. That we've actually done it, because quite often, we've just been there going I think we bit off more than we could chew. But as Gary said, you know, we were told no in the first instance, and then it was just a chance meeting with Ed Newmeyer when we were over filming You're So Cool, Brewster. He made the fatal error of saying after we went out for a meal with him, like, "Oh, you know, if you're ever up for it, you guys should do a documentary on RoboCop." And I don't think he expected me to be making notes on the flight home and probably emailing him or Skyping him within about a second of getting through the door. Like, "Hi, babe. Okay, I'll go jump on Skype now." So yeah, there was no doubt I wanted to do this.
I don't know if I'll jump in before Eastwood speaks about the same thing, but I lived down the street for many years from Ed's wife, Leslie, before she was Ed's wife. And so I knew those guys too, even before RoboCop, when they were starting, you know, the whole process. So it's funny how incestuous this thing is. Anyway,
we're gonna have to refilm you now, Steve, and get that little.
Well, I'll send you this clip.
only 7 years late. Thanks, Steve.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm sure I met, and you guys had so much material to work for. Anyway, Eastwood, please.
Yeah, so I came on board again, as Gary mentioned, for the Fright Night documentary You're So Cool, Brewster. I basically reached out to Gary on Twitter because I saw an amazing, I think Grain Humphreys did an amazing Fright Night poster, and I adore that film. That's another film I watched way too young. And reached out to Gary and said, "Look, I'm an editor, and I can do motion graphics. I'd love to get involved in whatever capacity." And then a few months later, I was literally doing all the editing for Fright Night, which I didn't, but I wasn't expecting that. And then I'd done some browsing on Instagram and had seen already that Chris was a massive RoboCop fan. So we started having chats about that early on, and he'd mentioned that he'd met Ed Newmeyer, and I was like, again, listen, whatever you want me to do, let's do that. So then Gary put together a Kickstarter campaign, and we were off to try and raise some funds so we could go over to the States. We ended up raising £33,000. Which took us three and Adam, our producer, over to the States, where we shot first in Burbank, where obviously we met you, Steve. Yeah. We were in there for how many? Was it like 10 days, 11 days or something? Maybe a bit longer. Yeah. And then we
that was like I'm sorry to cut in. That was like an effects shop or something. It was like
Rob Lucas's effects shop. We used to be with Steve Johnson as well.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a noisy studio, wasn't it? Because there was some construction going on. So we've had to fix some of that in post. But to be fair, some of it I left in because it just sort of melded in with the explosion, so it didn't really matter. We had a bit of fun with that. But yeah, I remember it was noisy on occasion, but it was a great little studio. And so we shot, I don't know how many people we shot in there. Initially, it was going to be 16, and then we ended up filming with probably 30, 40 people, maybe. Then Chris and I did like a one-day trip, which was absolutely manic, to Berkeley to meet Phil Tippett's lot. And Phil was not too pleased that we got there late because we didn't know, being Brits, there's usually one airport in each city, whereas in San Francisco there were several. So I think there's one in Berkeley, and we got the one to San Francisco, and we were like 2 or 3 hours late or something. And then we had to set up green screen, and he was like, "I've got this amazing workshop," and we were kind of like, "You're right, why do we?" Because all we ended up doing with Phil Tippett's green screen was putting his workshop in the background anyway. But yeah,
the exact same background.
Yeah,
he came around and he was brilliant. And then hopped over to Dallas, where Chris and I were in like Disneyland, basically, like everything. You know, you've got that skyline with the green
all the locations,
all the locations, and we had a night. We didn't have much off time, but we had like a night just going around, and went to Deep Ellum, went to the City Hall at night. So there's some footage which people will see on the Blu-ray of Chris and I sort of galloping around the City Hall, just like giddy kids. And then we finished that stint in New York, where we finished some principal photography for RoboCop, but then also filmed a lot of the cast and crew for RoboCop 2 and 3 over there. And we did Richard Eden, didn't we, from TV show in LA? So that was a bit earlier on. Wow. And then the guys, obviously we outsourced some more interviews, but then the guys went over to Munich and interviewed Jos Ficano. A few one cast member in London, was it? John Castle, was it? Was he in London?
Yeah.
So basically, like, it's across different continents, and between sort of like 5 or 6 of us. So there was Mikey as well, who was one of our producers, Mikey Perez, who came on, who Gary got on board, who helped book a load of the guests. And we were just so fortunate with how great the interviewees were. They were sensational.
Yeah, I don't even remember how. I don't know if I reached out to you guys or if somebody got in touch with me, but it was a thrill to be part of it. And then when I was there, I was like, have you talked to Steve Flick yet? Let me call him up. Let me get you in there. And he was in a couple days later, which was great.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's
Brought the
marvelous.
in as well, Steve. So that was another thing for Chris and I were like, what? It was the truck timing chain that's used for RoboCop's foot, and I basically grabbed that off of you straight away.
Hey!
It's,
Give me.
Yeah.
Well, this will be in the Hollywood Sound Museum. But
Beautiful.
yeah, it's just an old truck timing chain. And I don't remember which one. I thought it was maybe Chris that performed it in the actual piece, or I
Nah,
don't
that was
remember.
it.
It was
Yeah.
Eastwood? Okay.
We all had to go on it.
But what was great, Eastwood, is you instinctively knew how to use it with the getting the click and everything. You just figured, you heard it in your head or whatever, but you did it perfectly.
There's nothing, because I'm sound orientated, as you know, Steve. Sound and music and sound effects, and so that's always been one thing that was never covered in any of the other documentaries, to my knowledge. I think Stephen Flick talked about it in an article that he did, because we did some research, but actually seeing the prop and seeing it work, and so when it was literally just like magic. I know Chris had a play too, putting it down and just hearing that reverby footstep. Obviously it's not complete because it's missing some of the whamps that
the synth wop that John P made, but you guys took care of that. You really did. It's funny because Stephen goes on about how many hundreds of takes that they tried before, and this was in several of them, and just different permutations and all that until they settle on sometimes the simplest solution is the best one.
Was there any other props? Because that's one thing we never had, was because Stephen Flick mentioned in the doc, and he talked to us about it being like 104 footstep tests. Yeah. Were there any other props that you used? Any other like combinations of sounds that you can recall?
I don't remember. And they had to rebuild part of this for RoboCop 2. I think the initial one they kind of destroyed during the thing, but I don't remember any specific ones. I hadn't actually started with the guys officially at that point. I came on a little later, but I still had all the material and all that, so that's how I learned the history. I mean, when I started at that shop, I listened to the library a couple times and just asked endless questions and all that, because that's my party, that's my thing. So I was absorbing all of it. So I've sort of become the sort of a historian of all that, and it's another reason why I'm starting the museum. But but as far as I know, that's the only physical prop that they built.
Yeah. Can we just say as well, like the feedback we've had so far, we saw somebody on Twitter, X, but we keep calling it Twitter because it's just saying X.
No, me too.
Twitter, it's Twitter.
I'm just saying X, doesn't it? But we saw somebody post a little snippet of the sound. People are just getting a massive kick out of the fact that you've got this quintessential 80s slick sci-fi movie, and then nothing's more 80s than like Betamax and VHS sound recordings, and everybody's like, can it get more 80s than this? So we're seeing people sharing those sounds and those clips, and you put us in touch as well with David Whittaker. Yeah. Who was in charge of obviously like what's the word, but basically like archiving and creating sort of the documents for all of the different sounds.
He wrote How to Cut Robo, which we traded around in-house for people who would come on the show that didn't have time to sit down with us and learn what was what. So
that was you. That wouldn't be in there if it wasn't for you. I'm gonna keep kissing your arm. That's true.
Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate the fact, and I'd like to talk to all of you about this. It's we talked to Gary just a little briefly before we started. These film docs that claim to be all inclusive very rarely talk about sound. It's one of the mysteries in a lot of people's minds still, and which is one of the reasons I'm so thrilled I'm a part of this and making these clips available through the Hollywood Sound Museum eventually. But you must have consciously thought about that. I mean, obviously RoboCop won an Oscar for sound effects, Special Achievement Award for Steve Flick and John P. But it's such a part of the whole character and franchise and all that you really did it justice, and I'm really appreciative of that. What were you thinking of that initially, or was it, or did I twist your arm when I came in?
We definitely set to do a deep dive. I mean, for the project as an overall thing, I knew we've said this before to some other people, but previously our Fright Night documentary had been a 2-hour piece, and much in the traditional sense of like the format of pre-production, production, post-production, legacy. So that was kind of the initial intention with RoboCop, and obviously to get as many people as we can. We just didn't realize how many people we would get, but it just evolved. And to be honest, RoboCop, you say about like the sound effects, you're right, they're not often referred to in these other kind of retrospectives, but I think it's just so fundamental, the sound of RoboCop. You're saying, the truck timing chain. I used to go around as a kid go like like trying to do the sound effects. I'd walk around playgrounds like that, people looking at me like a weirdo, but it is a fundamental part of the film. And obviously the fact, you're right, that it got the Oscar, the one thing it did get an Oscar for, which is kind of overlooked, to be honest. No one ever calls RoboCop an Oscar winning film, but technically it is. Yeah. And it kind of, maybe that speaks volumes as well to kind of the perspective of sound. If it was best director or best picture, the Oscar winning RoboCop, but they never referred to, I probably didn't even know it was an Oscar winning film until, later in my life, having been watching it since I was 5. So to be honest, to unpack that, and I think even for me, it was eye-opening. And I know watching it with my mum the other day, who's been, who got me into it in the first place. Like both her and her fella were really interested when they saw you with the truck timing chain. Oh. And I think what's really nice about this, and especially with what Eastwood's done and everything, I mean, there's so many good things to say about RoboCop, but I think not just with RoboCop, really showcase, like, it's more than just the people you see on screen and the explosions or the director or anything like that. I think, we're probably one of the first to really kind of go, look at all these tiny details that you take for granted. And especially hearing like the onset audio versus the final piece, the RoboCop gun and everything like that. I think, I'm just glad we were there to do it. Whether this was all intentional from the very get-go, I don't know, but it certainly evolved for us. Well, I think we're onto it.
That's one of the fascinating things about making a documentary, is there's so much that you learn on the way, and you might not even have a clear objective, but one certainly forms while you're maybe even as late as into the editing room, but still you're getting all the pieces and putting it together, and suddenly it turns into something. So that's wonderful. Chris, you mentioned something. I was very curious. You do feature a lot of the original production recordings. You didn't get those from me. Where did those come from?
I'm going to pass that honor over to Eastwood and Gary.
Ron South, the assistant editor, he had a load of sound effects and John Davison's recordings digitized.
Okay.
So it's a bit of a combination. Obviously, you gave us all of the sort of the motor sound effects and the servos and all that sort of stuff, I think. I'm pretty sure you did, because I remember having organized it all. They were all wipes, I think. But yeah, Ron South gave us some of the John Davison recordings, which was awesome, just hearing that. But what he only had the final sound. He didn't have the original, if you like. So I sort of tried to reverse engineer it to make it sound, basically by speeding it up and changing the pitch.
No, you did a fantastic job, and showing the VCR in sync with the thing, that you basically got it right. I mean, that's, I mean, you cheated a few things editorially, but for the most part, that's all it was. And talking again, what you were saying before, I love the fact that it's all this old tech. I try to enforce with these talks that I have with all these different professionals from sound and just filmmaking in general, that it's the imagination of the thing. It doesn't have to be high tech. I get very upset sometimes when people just go on about plugins and technology and all that, when just going out and recording sounds, and some of this old, wonderful, clunky stuff produces amazing things that you can use for this stuff. So
it's a bygone era, I think. And I thought that's, again, what I'm really happy with. I think RoboCop's kind of, to me at least, one of the pinnacles of so many moving parts coming to fruition, and it was pretty much towards the end of that analog era, really.
It really was.
Digital effects and everything. And I dare say, I think, you get, it's like filmmakers, independent filmmakers with little to no budget, you end up coming up with something far more creative than when you've just got a smorgasbord of, I'll just use this plugin, that digital thing. You have to think outside the box with your limitations. And I think, it's nice to be able to sort of celebrate that with this.
that's a huge thing that I've learned along the way. It's the limitations force you to be more creative. So that's a great point. And I love that you included the little bit where I'm actually geeking out about the analog era and how the one beef I have with you, but you didn't have it to use. But I say something about, rows and rows of film on racks, and you cut to a picture of our 1/4-inch library, which were just the little tiny tapes. Obviously you didn't have the right picture to use, but it got the point across. But back in the day, we would have racks and racks of reels of film. I mean, big, huge reels of film. For each reel in the movie, there's dozens and dozens of elements cut on mag film, and they would just go on for miles in the building. And I appreciate that you included that, because it's something that's just so alien to kids these days when they have a hard drive this big that has 10 terabytes of sound effects, which used to fill a whole building. Yeah, I'm still boggled by some of that.
The thing with today's stuff, though, is, and obviously you get Denis Villeneuve stuff's amazing and bespoke and distinctive. But
Sure.
a lot of films now, when they do that, there's no distinctive sound to a lot of the sound effects now. And like RoboCop obviously borrows from, you've got the John Wayne chin shot, which is hilarious. That definitely gets a laugh when people.
There are a couple of library effects, but for the most part, it's all original.
Wind down.
You get the wind down of
Oh
the
yeah,
biplane from
Ben
Star Wars.
Burt, yeah.
Everything else pretty much is like, I mean, I was watching The Mandalorian like last season, and there's a homage, obviously, where intentionally they ripped off Ed 209 sound effects to put in with a creature that Phil Tippett helped animate, I believe, or his company animated it. And straight away, within 2 seconds, I was like, that is Ed 209. That's a robot sound. I was like, that was Ed 209. And that's the thing, like, you can close your eyes and RoboCop sounds like Robot. There's no other character out there that sounds like RoboCop. It's the same with Ed 209, aside from the biplane, which is obviously from the Millennium Falcon. But that again, I think is just what's so impressive about RoboCop.
They should have utilized the Wilhelm scream then, shouldn't they? Dick Jones going out the window.
Let's not go there. I'm actually working on a doc on the Wilhelm right now. Actually.
Oh wow, nice.
So that'll be fun. Yeah, Anna Quinlan in New York is putting that together. I've talked with her several times on camera. Hopefully we'll have that early next year. But
I hope there's a montage in that. I can imagine. To be honest,
there are a few.
A full length documentary of just Wilhelm screen clips from its entire history.
What's funny is she just told me, I hope I don't get in trouble for giving this away, but she was playing with all the material and cataloged all the footage, and she already started putting together a reel of all of us not doing imitations of the Wilhelm necessarily, but all of us vocalizing different sounds. So there's this really quick montage of all of us vocalizing sound effects, which is pretty funny. But oh gosh, I've lost my train of thought. I do this sometimes when I get caught up in it. But but there aren't very many stock effects, as you say. It's all original material, and it's all got that very distinctive thing. And Dave Whitaker's little outline of how to cut Robo came in handy for all the other franchise, all the other people who dealt with this franchise, because it became this sort of proprietary thing that you hand over for something to be RoboCop. It's got to sound like this. So yeah, there's all kinds of stuff like that. But yeah, there's so many great signature sounds. Like I said, the synth, I think one of the clips that you used of me is where I'm talking about the very synthy stuff that John P did on the ARP 2600. There was another moment. I don't know if I talked about this on camera. It's not in the piece, but when he comes down after Ed 209 trips down the stairs, and then Robo comes out into the parking structure, and this bright light shines in his eyes, and there's this wonderful synth sort of blast, the sort of sparkle as the light sort of consumes his visor. And I've used that in other things, I have to say. It was something that John P made for the show. He just made this whole take of all these different sparkles and buzzes and things like that.
I think, did they use that in the second film as well, when he's getting pulling apart? Is that the same?
We did cut sound on the second film. No more after that. So it was the same guy. So we all knew the library really, really well. I haven't even seen RoboCop 3, to be honest. So I know that they had some of our stuff, but not us.
I've got a question actually, Steve. Bit off
Please.
talking on the sound stuff.
Yeah.
I'm just curious if you've seen anything about this RoboCop game that's coming out, RoboCop Rogue City. And all I've seen constantly, especially from the ardent fans, they've done a pretty stand-up job, but they must have not used much in the way of original sound materials. And everyone is complaining about the sound effects for the Auto 9. And I'm surprised that, given that kind of constant feedback these guys are getting, that guys like yourself or even Stephen Fleck haven't had them kind of come and knocking, going, by chance, guys, do you have that original sound effect?
And it's not like we're inaccessible, you know. I'm out there. You can
Maybe we can make this happen then, because
no, you know,
when it comes out, it will be quite jarring firing that gun when I'm playing it and going like, it's not quite right.
One of the things I do at the museum is make some of this stuff available and put people in contact with others so that it sounds right. And finding all this stuff. I mean, when I was working at the shop, my informal title was Sound Effects Wrangler, because we would be doing films that had characters from other films, like Joe Dante especially is a huge film buff, and there are all kinds of creatures and aliens and fun things in his films that are references to older films, and he would want them to sound authentic. And so it would be my job to go out and find those original recordings if they could be found. And so I groove on that. I'm totally, you know, let's make it right. Let's make it sound like it's supposed to, you know.
It's happening. Let's do it. We'll get a nice special thanks in the game as well. God knows we're trying to add our names to Blu-rays and the documentary. So let's get on the game, sod it. Save the day.
That's fantastic. No, I'm in. One of the things that I really love is that you found that great interview with the great Basil Palvadoros. And managed to incorporate that, because he didn't pass away that long ago, but it was enough time that you weren't actually able to get him for your piece. Where did that come from? And that must have been a fantastic find for you guys.
Well, throughout the 7 years, I'd often just scour the internet, whether it's obviously YouTube, where most people start, or like archive.org, or anywhere basically, even like Wayback Machine. I would just go in and just randomly type on specific websites, whatever it is, and try and find Basil, because that was one thing. Obviously the score, we knew we wanted to try and cover that. And then it was towards the end, to be fair, it was probably like 9 months ago, that Andrew McLean, I think the chap's called, who put together a music documentary, self-financed, self-funded, and he had a long form interview with Basil up on the internet. And I basically reached out and said, look, I would love to use some of this. It was when he was just they just made Starship Troopers, so he's in his like audio office, and talking about working with Verhoeven, and luckily he's not directly talking about RoboCop, but he's talking about science fiction, and obviously, you know, use that in the right context. It's not like we're making it up. He's not talking about Conan and we're going, all right, we'll make it out like it's RoboCop. He's literally talking about like orchestral music for science fiction, so it's all relevant. And he was working with Paul Verhoeven. But yeah, when I found that, and I was like, oh, please just let us use some of it. And he was like, yep, you can use whatever you want. So again, that was another give Chris a call to be like, look what we found. And then just weaving the music in between that interview was so much fun, and literally like giving myself chills when I was doing that, just being like, oh, let's put this under this bit, and let's put Verhoeven, because Verhoeven's a big music person too, as you'll know, and he's really passionate about that. So he talks about like recording Abbey Road, and John Davison talks about those guys hanging around in each other's houses after the shoot, and working on the score. So we managed to get Basil in. That music section I'm really proud of, because we always wanted to do that, but that came about at the very, like 9 months ago. So towards the very end of production, before then, it was like a minute long or something about the music, which again, just getting the music in there, we were hopeful, but I'm glad Basil's in there, and I'm glad it's vintage too. I'm glad it's not too recent, and obviously he passed, unfortunately, but there's something about watching like a vintage interview from 11 years after RoboCop, rather than it be like 2005. Oh, sure. I'm glad it was from that era. So yeah, luckily Andrew was super thankful. He's got a credit in the documentary, but it was him filming a load of different composers for a composer documentary.
I don't think I saw that final version until I think I watched the episode, to be fair. I know we watched that one version you'd done. And then I think, like Eastwood said, like, talk about how this thing just constantly evolved. I think we were kind of almost virtually locked quite some time ago once we had incorporated Weller, Dr. Weller. And then I think it was Eastwood just a couple months ago went, oh, can you do me a favor? Can you get some red and blue gels? And can you just like get your vinyl soundtrack out and do some artsy shots? So it's that kind of like, right, clear my table, get some lights on it, and then just go into town by getting all these close-ups. But yeah, I think getting, you know, he's obviously absent in terms of being now, but I think just being able to actually get something from his own words in there really helped fleshed it out. It was great as it was when it was like 40 seconds to a minute, and then when I saw that, I was like, "Holy shit, we got Basil!"
That's wonderful. No,
Steve,
that's stuff.
You might not know this, and this is proper geek territory, but this is what we're about, aren't we? So, for ADR, so we spoke to Dom Broughton, the boom operator, and obviously it's his prerogative to say in the interview. He said, and we don't include it in the documentary because nobody could sort of corroborate it. I guess not that we're making anything true crime related, but like we want to make sure that we're talking truth. So he said that 98% of the recorded sound was featured in the film. But yet, I know, again, Chris will be the same. There's spots in that film where it's clearly ADR. Yeah. So I wanted to just ask if you could shed some light on that.
Oh gosh, who cut the ADR? Was it Avram Gold?
It was.
Yeah, he would be the one to ask. I think that there was a good amount of production in there. So I don't, even the slight mistruths have so much basis in fact that, they had to come up with their opinion some way. And I think for a certain amount of it, it would be a gut feeling that he's right, because there is a lot of naturalistic production. But obviously, a lot of Peter's stuff had to be looped because it was processed and separate. And once you take one character out of the equation, everybody else has to be replaced in that scene too, just to have separation. So, this is my way of not giving you an indirect answer, but saying he's probably fairly right. I think that there was it was really nicely recorded. They did do a very nice job. And any problems that they would have had wouldn't have been their fault. It would have been, the locations or the effects, or, you've got a lot of guns in this film and explosions.
The Yosti cam as well, I think, was one of the ones that caused that, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love your moments in the doc where you actually do sync up production to, some of the shots so you can hear what it was like. Because sometimes it's just ridiculous. It's like, there's no way this can go in the show.
The one that always jumps out to me when I watch the film, and I love the line, and we didn't feature it in the doc, but there's like a call girl or a prostitute in the police station, and when Weller comes out, she like goes, "Oh, Tiger," and she like says that to Peter Weller, and she's clearly not saying that in the film, but I always love that line that she's like super impressed at Peter Weller or Murphy. But
that's very much Loop Group, I think. Yeah.
So I was gonna for looping in those days, like you wouldn't obviously get just a bit part actress to come back and do that line. Would you get like a generalist that would just?
It's called the Loop Group. Yeah, we usually have 4 or 5 actors come in that are very deliberately cast for the kinds of things you need, like prison crowd. Yeah,
I actually know. So, I'm sure I said this to you guys. It's amazing now. So many memories are flooding back, especially in the post stages. It wasn't too long ago that I know who one of them is that did those loop voices. It's Jonathan Stark, who played Billy Cole in Fright Night.
I think you mentioned that to me ages ago, passing Chris. That's awesome.
It must have been, and I remember being thrown. So, someone we'd already done interviews for the previous documentary. Bear in mind, not like someone who hadn't necessarily had a career. Fright Night was pretty big. His role's quite prominent. And I think when he saw, when I was probably posting constantly, he was like, "Oh, I did some ADR on that." I was like, do we go back out?
A lot of on-camera actors supplement their income, by doing that sort of thing. It's a fun gig. One other loop group line that stands out in the film for me is there's a moment where when Robo first appears, and one of the cops has that drunk perp, and he says, "What is this shit?" And as they follow them running down the hall, you hear one of them say, "That's a good question," which had to have been a Loop Group line. You can just barely hear it right after he says that.
I'll go back to watch it now.
Yeah, if you listen carefully in that loop group when they're sort of scuttling down the hall to see what this is, that's a good question. I can just laugh so much.
Such a cheesy counter.
Yeah, well, there's some really great moments in films where the loop group had fun with coming up with something. Like there's one in Roger Rabbit that I love that people get wrong, but I've actually heard the take. It's in the nightclub, the Toon nightclub, and the octopus bartender is making drinks, and there's this couple there. And the woman's, and these are totally added lines from the loop group. The woman says, "I love the music." And the guy says, "I don't know why." Just a great little moment. And it's funny how sound, if you know what it can do and the things you can do to hit a plot point or get some exposition out or just, move the story along, it's something that a lot of filmmakers aren't aware of. And, once they're able to master that and help tell the story with sound helping, really does. And I love that you, I should have given you more pictures of John P., but I don't have very many of them. The funny thing is about John P. is he is, and as you guys learned through your course of talking to everyone, he is not of this earth. He is an otherworldly being. And I think that the picture that I gave you of John P. is probably the only picture that's in focus of him.
We love that though. Again, it adds to the mystique, the fact that, because I'm not one for like repeating. If I show a shot, I need to do it differently the next time if we're going to show it. So that image pops up 4 or 5 times and it's animated different every time. But like the fact he's in his sunglasses, he's by some synths, he's got his hair bleached, like that all works. He is in it later on when we see him with the Oscar.
Yeah.
He's next to so he's a bit more formal. But I love that every time you keep saying like the mysterious John P., it's the same picture and it's just him in the sunglasses. Like it that is quite funny, I think.
Yeah, he's still working too. I mean, he lives in New York, but he still works through the internet. I don't think anyone's actually seen him in person in a long time. We've spoken to him over the phone. It's funny. I just chatted with Jeffrey Bay, who used him on some Sony animated feature not too long ago. He uses him quite often, but there was a time he called him up and there was some kind of disturbance over the phone and he had to keep calling back and he kept hearing this weird connection. And then like the third time he calls back, there's a pause and then John P. came on and, "Hey, how are you?" And Jeff told me later that, yeah, I guess he hadn't booted up yet. He hadn't loaded completely. And
either that or he was on the other side of the line just recording like static, or his voice just, "Shh, don't say it. No, I won't say anything, but you keep talking, that's it." Add into his library.
Who knows?
You'll have to give him a nudge for us, Steve. I know he's elusive, but just say, look, again, we pay you pay a lovely tribute to him in the doc, and he's in there, and people are getting a kick out of it now after seeing that. The fact that people just assumed it was beeps that you could just get off a hard drive, but it's like, no, you literally had to perform the beeps and then pitch them and tweak them.
He would make hours and hours of them for each film, brand new. I mean, we had an endless amount of them in the library that we could pull from for different projects, and still do occasionally. But he was happy to just sit down at the ARP and just make a new set of stuff, a new library. We used to joke that he has to come up with a new piece of equipment, a sound for a new piece of equipment, futuristic thing in a science fiction film. He would go into his home dimension and record his toaster. And so we would joke about John P. But it's just amazing stuff. So I'm glad he's a part of it, even indirectly in this too.
I think we got 2 Mysterios really with this. We've got John P. for the sound world, and then we've got Rob Bottin. And in a way, I think it kind of enforces that air of mystery about the pair of them. These geniuses of, and I'm sorry, it sounds terrible saying of their time, but certainly like so iconic in the 80s. And yet now they're just these Mysterios who I think they work. I don't know if they work. You may get hold of them on the phone. You may not. No one knows what happened to them. But I think, it's good. Like I said, fair play to Eastwood, and you guys telling us that we've managed to kind of build them as characters. Yeah. No, it's great. You even sort of have a mysterious tone whenever we talk about him too. It comes in the background, which is wonderful. And yeah, you mentioned Rob Bottin. I actually
I don't want to say too much because I don't want to step on anyone's thing, but there is actually a project going on about where is Robotine. Someone's actually looking into that.
I think I don't know if I'd heard that, but because there's that Facebook group, isn't it, in search of Robotine?
Yeah. I think there's an actual like article or doc or something that someone is trying to put together. So
yeah,
we'll see if he comes out. It'll be like the Bigfoot footage, you know, walking or, you know, just a quick shot of him or something like that.
Got the right caliber with the hair and beard as well.
Yes.
And the stature, I think.
Absolutely. Let me ask all of you guys this. Start with you, Gary, because you've been quiet for a while.
Oh,
What over the course of this thing and pulling all this footage and having people like me track things down for you and interviewing everyone along the way, what was the most surprising thing you learned about RoboCop that you did not know before? Each of you. Start with Gary.
That's a hard one. There's so much in 4 hours. I mean, my favorite character, I bore the lads with this completely. He's Dick Jones. In film was one of my favorite characters as the villain, and I obviously I never minded the last scene when he dies. I know it's a bit cheap. I really liked when Ronnie talked about, you know, how it's supposed to look with that, you know, him coming to the camera. It's a bit of a spoiler now. And the animation that Eastwood got made of obviously that, it just blew my mind, because obviously I remember Eastwood showing me the actual cartoon like stills really of that scene, and it's things like that. It's like, you know, it's when you find out in a doc like ours and many other docs where things sometimes come out not as good as they should have done, but actually there's a reason why that it didn't happen the way it should have, and it's no one's real fault really. I know obviously talk about the camera lens and whatnot, but I just like the idea that we find stuff like that. We did it in our last doc with Stephen King's It, you know, with the spider at the end. You know, everyone rips into that, but actually when you see the raw footage, it looks really good. And when you see the actual doll they made of Ronnie, it looks like Ronnie. And the arms are more length, you know.
You see it in person, it looks great.
Yeah.
There's no reason to think that it wouldn't have worked.
Yeah, I would love to have that. Probably it'd have been somewhere for me 30 years ago. So that's things like that for me. I mean, I'm a big effects guy, you know. I know the lads obviously are all sound and obviously, and they obsessed with RoboCop. I love special effects, and it's things like, you know, the Mountain Man scene. I never realised as well that a meal, there was 2 makeups for a meal. I always, you know, you see the iconic image. And actually in the film, it's obvious there's 2 makeups. The one where he first rolls out and it's the half face, and then it's like the one you'll see obviously on the stills. I never put 2 and 2 together, you know, on that. And seeing Bart Mixon's actual behind the scenes photographs of the makeup process, it was just brilliant for me. So yeah, my answer is probably going to be worse than these guys, because they obviously dissect that movie.
They eat it for breakfast every day. Yeah, Chris.
Okay, cool. This might not be original. So as Gary's alluded, you know, and I think it's the same for Eastwood. Certainly, like, you know, photos. As soon as the internet was, you know, available to us, I know like RoboCop Archive was one of my first websites. You know, scoured, and even in prepping for the doc, you know, I was going through and archiving so many low-res JPEGs that would never be able to be used in it. So I feel like, you know, as soon as I know, you know, I can even glint and be like, there's a photo I've never seen before or anything. So I do know a lot about RoboCop. I would say there's a lot of stuff that we learned from you guys, and not blowing smoke up your ass, but it is like learning more details about the sound, which I'd never thought about before, or even dare I say appreciated, until going like, holy shit. But maybe if I had to like pinpoint another one, and utilizing the whole animation thing again, and I think
keep talking about sound. No.
I think, to be honest, the thing that kind of like caught us off guard was we did when we were filming this other documentary, Pennywise, in Vancouver the following year. It was very much because we knew how RoboDoc was growing and growing and growing. Like, who else can we get? We actually put a day aside in Vancouver to get some of the Canadian series cast. But one of the little lads from the original Stephen King's It, I knew was in RoboCop 2 as one of the little league kids, the one who's the notable with his vocals. And it was only during the course of his interview I thought, right, we can do a little bit about RoboCop 2 and that little, you know, notable scene with the kids. And then he starts saying to us, oh, actually, do you know I was in the first film? And that's what I was like, please go on. So he tells the story, and then watching that evolve, and then even better, having that then replicated into this little animated short, you know, voices and everything.
Mhm.
I think just it's things like that, you know, that kind of go, wow, I thought I knew all the deleted scenes. And I think Ed Neumeyer says himself, you know, with RoboCop, it's not like out there somewhere as some 160-minute director's cut. It's very much a film that was made pretty much intact, aside from just one or two or even three primarily media break sequences. So actually to find out, oh, hang on a sec, there was going to be more that just didn't even get filmed. To me, as someone who's lived and breathed RoboCop since about 5, was a bit like, well, there we go, there's something. But honest to God, I think across the dock, there's stuff I probably now take for granted that, God, I actually didn't know that before we did this.
Yeah, I agree with you. When you see an alternate take or some deleted scene or something, it's really like, if it's something that you're so ingrained on the original version, seeing it, it's like an alternate reality almost. It's like, you know, what if the scene was shot on a Tuesday instead of a Wednesday, that kind of thing. Yeah, very odd. Eastwood.
Well, just on that, actually, I'm just going to add to that the animation. So any animations that you see, which we had Martin Goal, who's a fantastic artist, and then we had two of my friends, Matt and Kieran, who animated those scenes. But basically, I said to the artist, don't copy the composition of how you see it in the film. I want it to be from a different angle, so it feels like you're looking at something completely from a, you know, if it was directed differently kind of thing. So it's the same with the grocery scene. We've got high up angles, we've got angles where you're looking at the fridge from different angles. Dick Jones, when he's falling out the window, there's one shot, but then the other shots are obviously different because that's Ronnie Cox. So that was in our minds when we were directing those, was like, want it to feel fresh. I don't want it to feel like we're just mimicking the images from the movie that we've taken screen grabs. So I'm glad you've mentioned that. But yeah, mine's going to be, I'm going to leave, because people will be watching this. I don't want to spoil that much. There's so many things that Chris will know about, like the stuff with the cops that we found out. There's, again, the Melting Man makeup, the fact that they put ball bearings in the fingers and weighted that down. All that stuff's super cool to me. But like, I'm going to go with one of the Easter eggs, which I thought was mind-blowing. Most people probably don't give a shit, but I was like, that's incredible. Which is Hophead coming in the grocery store and passing the Marvel comics and picking up the Iron Man issue, 142 Iron Man issue. I'm a big like comic fan. I never read that issue before, but then I read it after finding out. I was going through it literally frame by frame, going, which comic did he pick up, and managed to find out which one it was. But the fact that the issue that he picks up highlights Iron Man's brand new suit, and Iron Man's relevant because Ed Neumeyer was tasked as an executive to read a load of Iron Man comics and Judge Dredd. But he told Bart Mixon, again, this isn't in the doc, but it's an offcut, that he wanted to make an Iron Man movie but couldn't get the rights. And then obviously him and Mike Miner wrote RoboCop. But the fact that there's that little Easter egg there of Hophead picking up this Iron Man comic and then RoboCop straight away walking in on display in his brand new suit, shining with all that oil and all the neon lights. Like, I love that little bit of sort of like film history that's in there for like 10 seconds. Most people, again, won't recognize that, but when you're doing a documentary on stuff, you want to literally comb through it frame by frame. So that was one. And then we literally, I called Gary, who thought I was bonkers, I think, and said, I'm gonna get the issue. I've already ordered it off eBay, and we're gonna go and film with the Lee Sullivan, who's the artist for the original comic book line, the Marvel comics, and we're gonna get him to do a piece so that we can put that bit in the documentary. And we literally fed Lee the lines to do that, so it's in the documentary because I was just being a bit
a bit obsessive.
Yes, pretty much.
You actually reminded me of something that I don't know if I told you guys when we talked on camera 7 years ago. Judge Dredd. I remember my dad, who was a film science fiction consultant, actually worked with John briefly, looking over the script and all that. And I think one of his first notes was to John that, you know, the Judge Dredd people might have something to say to you guys. And he says, we're not as worried about that as we are Harlan Ellison with Brillo.
Oh.
And they actually had a little extra in the budget just in case Harlan sued them. But remarkably, he did not, I don't think. But
Harlan's the guy that got credited on the Terminator, isn't it? Because
yes, same reason. He thinks he owns every robot law enforcer, on the planet now, since he wrote that story. Harlan was a force of nature. I remember I've known him since I was 5 years old, and we were about as tall as each other when I was 5. But anyway, short guy. But he had a reputation for going after things like that. So, but remarkably, he didn't sue, and I think he actually liked the picture. So,
what was the one thing you found, Steve? Well, one of the things that you
oh
mentioned.
gosh,
Tell me that you knew it all.
well, I mean, even things that I was a part of, just hearing some of those alternate takes of things. Oh gosh. It still amazes me, and to see that they actually constructed a full-size Ed 209 for the shots in the boardroom, because I remember seeing it on display. There was a theater here that had just opened up. The Universal Studios has the City Walk, and they had a big theater complex there, and it opened about the time RoboCop was being promoted, and they actually had Ed 209 sitting in the lobby for a few days, and that was really cool to see that. But things that really surprised me, there wasn't much. Just the fact that Peter finally came around and was a part of it was pretty amazing to me. I'm so glad that he finally did that, because I know that he still does not talk about it in interviews or talks or anything. So you guys got really lucky, and I'm really glad that you were able to get him.
He was, to be fair, he was fantastic as well. You know, we were there was a lot of angst, you know, and a lot of like, well, we're not going to get him, so you know, fair play. He sort of trolled the internet and, you know, contacted so many people to get like just this array of archive material. And to be honest, for years, you know, we say this all the time, but we were so confident with what we had and the fact that everything else worked. And again, you know, not trying to downplay it, but I think learning from making this doc and, you know, really watching the film again and again to understand just, oh my God, every moving part of this film is fantastic. Every performance is fantastic. Every character is fantastic. So when it came, you know, for all those years that we didn't have Weller, I genuinely thought, you know, I still think this could work. Maybe we have to play him like the mystery man, like John P. and Rob. Truth be told, then, like, you know, now, especially like, you know, we did the interview and we did it over Zoom, Eastwood and I, which was while it was shot over in LA. And you know, as it kind of went on the interview, it's like, I've never seen him this animated before. And once put in there and seeing it, and we've had a lot of comments like saying he is absolutely on fire in this documentary.
He really is
There's
good.
sides to Weller, but I will say it felt like one side we were experiencing for the first half an hour, quite aloof. And then all of a sudden we just had this like moment where it's like, we've cracked him. We've cracked him. Okay, go, 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 go.
How long did you have him on camera?
4 hours? Was it about
Wow.
4 hours?
Or it was agreed that he'd do 4 hours and talk about the sequel. Not for 4 hours, but obviously part of that. But then he ended up doing 4 hours 35 minutes, hanging around for us. Hung around a little bit after we started. We stopped shooting and we were on a phone just to chat generally. But yeah, it was a massive relief for Chris and I, because we were so nervous. I remember it was a work day and we had to do it in the evening for the time difference. And or at work, my mind was just elsewhere, thinking, we've got to nail this. We've got to nail this. It's a chance again, because we had met him before in Manchester, sort of a year or two before, and that's how it all came about. But again, that was sort of reset, and we were, you know, you start thinking about literally posters on the wall of your hero and going, oh, we've got to nail this, for not just for us, but for the audience too, that they're expecting us to get something in there that's never been heard or seen before. So we did a lot of prep, but we were proper nervous. And then, like Chris said, we cracked him and we just had a little chat off, sort of off the record, and he basically found out Chris was Welsh, asked where we were from, and Chris said, I'm originally from Cardiff and I'm Welsh, and he was like, my family's Welsh, and that was it. He literally, like, shoulders relaxed, and he was just like,
oh, that's good.
And the documents that you had scanned for us of all of his notes, the memos, storyboards, everything, we literally had it on the desk, so we could talk to him about lines that he'd requested or little bits that he'd asked to be removed. So
yeah,
he sort of leaned in and was dead chuffed that we had that, and couldn't believe that we had it. And I think because, again, we were asking questions that he'd not been asked about, or not been asked about recently anyway. And then a load of nuggets that are definitely original questions. He seemed to enjoy the interview, and Jim, who filmed it over for us, Jim Kunz, it was amazing. And we were just super giddy doing it. We were proper nervous. And Gary was text me when he's done. Let me know when you
It was such an interesting like structure for us as well. You know, we knew we had him, and actually what benefited us in this respect, to be honest, is we, you know, Eastwood had put together pretty much a full cut.
Yeah.
And then for us, it was actually what an opportunity to get the man himself and almost retrofit the bits that were missing. And actually, so we came up with a smart move. I mean, we wrote God knows how many, countless amounts of questions, but the smart thing to do was actually structure it. Unlike the majority for you guys, where we worked on a chronological basis, you know, pre-production, involvement, and post and legacy. The key here was to start with those questions that we know are like, no one's ever going to have heard him talk about this. Work our way back into the standard formula and formulaic, sorry, and dare I say, kind of typical fan questions of, oh, how long did it take to wear the suit and everything? And once we kind of got past that and realized we still had a little bit of time left, I think that was one of my favorite moments, was when we were like, okay, we've heard some things about you, Dr. Weller, on the set. Dare we just, has this relationship blossomed enough that maybe we can start asking you probing you for some things that we would not have asked at all in that first instance. And I couldn't believe it, how much he obliged. And if anything, how animated he was, you know, the controversy of certain biscuit, the fact that, you know, other people are saying he wasn't the kindest of people on set, and to which he at least had, I'm not going to say it's fair, but a valid point as to why he was, you know.
So absolutely.
There was no defense about it. It was a straight up, this is why. And so to be able to then meld that with, as you said, having these kind of counter comments to corroborating was just absolutely mind-blowing.
Well, it's funny you should say that, because I did get to talk to him a few times on set, and once in his trailer, and it was a particularly rough day, and he was, you know, half, you know, in the suit and the head was off. He wasn't made up or anything like that, but I could tell he's, you know, this was a busy job for him, and he was just drained, but he was sweet enough to talk to me for a piece I was doing at the time, and I could sense that it was the work. It wasn't him necessarily personally, because I've seen him in other situations and he's always been very gregarious and very fun to talk to, and you know, and I had known him from Buckaroo Banzai because I had done some work back then, so we had a little bit of a connection too, and that, as you say, it always helps. What you were saying.
Gary had quite a good relationship with him in the run up as well. You know, what might have seemed like in a public persona, like, oh, he doesn't want to talk to you, he doesn't want this. You did some emails with him, didn't you, Gary?
Yeah, it's just like you just said, he was always really courteous to me on the emails. You know, when we were trying to locate him, every time we heard he was going to be in the UK or in Germany, was trying to work out where he was going to be. And you know, he was obviously quite, you know, kind of like concrete on the fact that he didn't want to be in RoboDoc for a long time. But he was always polite. He never told me to F off, you know what I mean? Which he could have done, you know, he had probably to do that because I kept nagging him. But I was always kind of like taken aback because of what we'd heard about him. But actually, he was very professional with us.
I'm very glad you got him, because this is really, it's really, like I said before at the beginning of this conversation, some docs say that they're completely inclusive of everything. And this is one of the few that I really believe sincerely lives up to that. So I'm thrilled that you guys had me in a small way. It's a great show, and it's streaming on Screenbox right now, and you've got DVD releases coming up and all that. Do you want to plug all that really quick?
Eastwood, you know the dates more than anybody now.
Get the dates up because I've had to flash those out, haven't I?
I'm terrible with any information like that. So you could be the man where I go, what is it again, Eastwood? Even though I'm signing the contracts, I just don't know what I'm signing.
He just pays it, yeah.
So in the States, if we're talking about digital and video on demand, so currently it's on Screenbox, also on Prime Video and Apple TV, and that's running through September. So the 4 episodes, it's a weekly episodic series, so we split it into 4 parts. It's coming to Blu-ray in the States October 17th, and that will be the complete series, obviously. And then in the States, in the UK, which is what we've been getting pestered about, or Gary's been getting pestered, because obviously we're Brits and we've got a load of people going, when's it coming out in our country? It's going to be out on the Icon Film channel on Amazon Prime, October 2nd through to October 23rd, which is my birthday, which will be fun because I'm going to watch that.
Nice.
And then that will be on Blu-ray on the 18th of December. So yeah, it's awesome that we're at this stage now where people are watching it. I think the fact that it's episodic and it's a 4-week, 5-week run, 2-month run if you consider the different territories, it's fun for us because we get to sort of dip in and out. It's like unfortunately with Netflix, we all binge Stranger Things as soon as it drops, and then people talk about it for a weekend, and then no one talks about it. Like we're lucky in that we're having a bit of a staggered release, which is all thankful to
I think that's great. I think that, I mean, as a child of episodic TV and waiting a week for an episode, it's no big deal. But the fact that we can, once it comes up and it's out there, we can watch it forever after that. But yeah, no, I really appreciate having something to look forward to next week, and what the cliffhanger-esque endings of some of these, you really look forward to it. So,
and I think as Eastwood has said, just one last thing for me, just you said at the very beginning, your support has been immense, and I said, even the fact that when it went very quiet during post-production over 7 years, I know I'd spoke to you on Facebook a couple of times, and you were always keen to be involved, and obviously asked for never any pressure from you at all. And obviously when we had that issue, obviously we needed scanning, you straight jumped into it,
I love this stuff.
Yeah, but we're so appreciative that, that, and I think we've been really lucky with the cast and crew of RoboCop, because it seems that everybody's had this love for this film where even no one's been really that peed off with us from the cast publicly and gone, where's this bloody documentary I feel? Everyone's been so gracious. I've been sending that links out to people like yourself, and I've had such nice feedback I've been sharing with the lads. It's been amazing, really, that people just seem to really love what the guys have achieved. So again, thank you from us. It really means a lot.
Well, no, thank you guys. I appreciate being a part of it. I'm glad I could help in my little way. I love that I'm well, I appreciate that. I'm peppered throughout, and I really enjoy that. And I was quite surprised to see my name several times in the end, and right at the beginning of the special thanks, which I was not expecting at all. And
you paid us to do that. We had
Fess up. Come on, Steve.
Oh, and being an archive producer too. That was a big thrill to see.
The least we could do, honestly, like I said, it just wouldn't have happened, Steve. Like luckily we came to you and you said yes. We'd not even tried. I was like, Steve's eager, I'm gonna go to Steve, and you said yes. But like, I don't know what we'd have done if you'd have said no, guys, F off. But you didn't say that.
And you are, yeah.
I think what helps is because you're an archivist yourself. We've had people before do stuff like that subsequently actually on other projects, and they don't get what we want, and it's like, where's that dog? And they're only grabbing the quick things. Well, actually, because you're an archivist, you know what to look for, and you know actually that little bit which may seem like nothing to some people, like a name on a proposed cast list. That's massive for this documentary. That's huge. So again, I think Eastwood, struck gold with yourself, obviously, in your expertise there, and that's not again bigging you up in any way. We don't need to do that, and that's why you deserve the accolades and the archive producer, because you were an archive producer for us. So you need to pull your finger out on the next couple.
I've got a little story just to tell you as well, just while we're talking about release. So we obviously sent some of the key cast and key people that helped us out links to watch this ahead of release.
Yes.
We sent John Davison the screeners and said, here you go, John. Thanks so much for your participation. You've been an absolute diamond. And he said, thanks, but I'm going to wait for the Blu-ray because I'm a physical media addict.
Yeah.
That's I was just like, that just sums John Davison up.
John is so old school. Yeah. I've known him forever too, and he's such a sweetheart, and he knows his stuff. I mean, the man worked with Roger Corman, for God's sake. I mean, he knows his stuff, and he's a hard worker, and you handled him great with the little reactions and things like that. Because even I bring him up when I talk about the voice of Ed 209, and you cut to a shot of John going, yep. Because if you were in the room, that's how he would do it. Yep. The
amount of people that have mentioned the reactions of John Davison. What was funny is because Chris and I were like, oh shit, where we pissed him off. Like Chris was sat there going like, the question wasn't that sort of divisive, but he would just go next, or he would just pause and go, no,
next case.
Or he'd pause and go,
get to the point. And my wife forever quotes him as well. The line of he treated people pretty poorly. Constantly she says that now, my wife. She absolutely I think he does it twice, doesn't it? Yeah, I think we did pretty good. So yeah.
That's pure John. I still have the voice. I still have the voice sample that I sent you guys from his house when you had asked him, what was there a set year when the film took place? What era, what year does the film? And he said there just We never said.
Future. And Mike Miner, because I sent Mike Miner the same thing, but we got the scripts again from you that said like 1995. And in one of the which again fans are getting a massive kick out of, because it's not the definitive answer, but in the treatments it says set in Detroit 1995, and then in one of the teaser trailers it says 1991.
Yeah.
But yeah, John Davison. But he basically after the fact, because we thought that we'd upset him or why he was being so short with us, but he basically said, I didn't want to trip up because I had no idea what you were going to ask us about RoboCop 2. And so I didn't want to give you anything wrong. So that's why he kept going like next or nope. But then we've utilized those reactions. But he was just being protective, basically. He didn't want to give us some fake trivia.
He's a very good guy. And I'm glad I'm just glad you documented all this so well. I'm really pleased. And thank you guys for being here and including sound so importantly in your piece. That's probably, if I have any one thing to say to you guys, it's, bless you for making it such a big part of this. And it's great to see you all. It's been, like I said, it's been a minute. It's 7 years. It doesn't feel like that, but
my body feels like it.
All the footage on a hard drive feels like it. Yeah. Oh. All right, gentlemen, thank you,
Steve.
Let's do this again for the next one, whatever the hell that might be.
Cheers, Steve. Thank you.
Everyone out there, thank you for watching. Keep listening. See y'all
later.
Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.